Today we have Peggy Smith-Venturi to speak to us about her method and ideas in book box making. And here's Peggy.
Hi. Well, again, thank you all for being here and facing this kind of nasty weather, but it's really a pleasure for me to come and share some of this work with you. So I have brought 3 pieces, all of them are new, and the first piece I'm going to present, it actually isn't finished. When I agreed to do this, I was just starting this piece, and I thought it might be interesting not to finish it, but do it in a way where I could show you the whole process of doing the piece from the concept to being almost finished. And the other 2 pieces I started last year and finished this year. And so I want to just open them for you and get feedback and get your interpretations and responses and questions if you have anything. Now this show has sort of inspired me because of the idea of form and content, and particularly content, because I feel very strongly that there really is no separation between content and form. So when I present this, I want to emphasize the how content informs every decision of the multiple decisions you have to make when you do something like this, and give you a good sense of how that influences the whole piece. So I thought I'd start by talking a little bit about how this work, how this form evolved for me. For a long time I did sculptures that were enclosed boxes, some very big, some small, but all of them are only accessible through a little opening or a window. And I really liked that idea because the viewer could only one viewer at a time could look at it, so it made that personal connection with the piece. And the other thing that I especially liked was that the interior, with a large interior like that, I could create a whole environment. And instead of having a sculpture on a pedestal, I could create a whole place for that piece to live. So the images in the piece had a place where they were living, and I wanted that contact between the image and its environment. So I did a number of those pieces, and they were difficult to access. And at one show, I had a woman had gone around and looked at all these boxes, and she came up to me and she said, "Don't you want to just rip them open?" And so I thought, well, you know, she has a point, but at that part, I really wanted them kind of hidden away and a little difficult to access. But after doing a number of those pieces, I started searching for another form, and I waffled all over the place searching for something. But then I took a cross-country road trip, and since I couldn't be building anything, I decided to do a little bit of writing. So when I came back, I had all these little bits of writing, and I decided maybe I should make some kind of a way to hold this writing together. So fortunately, I had a copy of the wonderful Japanese bookbinding book, and was able to go into that and see how Japanese book boxes are made. So I based this on that. And, you know, just thinking, oh, it'll be nice to make a Japanese book box. One thing that I got from this was the idea of using, embroidering the title right onto the book. And I really like the idea of integrating the title with the book and actually doing the typeface in a way that sort of suggests what's in the book. So I made this one with applique on it, and then so this was the first one I made, and when I finished it, I thought, well, this is, you know, a little bit three-dimensional. why not extend the sides and make it even more three-dimensional? So I could build something inside and enclose it. And that gave me the sense that I could have something that's enclosed, but at the same time would be accessible to an individual person. So it still maintained that one-to-one contact with the piece. Plus, you could open it at will or keep it hidden. So I decided to explore this idea of having images, three-dimensional images inside a box. So this is the very first piece I made, experimental piece. And the title of it is Free, which is rather prescient because I felt freed after I started doing these. So again, I embroidered the title, and then I did some practice with braiding so I could make these ties for the book box. I really like the idea of the Japanese, the very simplicity of that kind of tie. And then I made the pins out of wood, and I could paint those any colors. So the embroidery thread is great because there's a multitude of colors, so I then could select something to relate to the fabric or paper that I'm using on the outside.
Excuse me, when you say embroidery, you mean literally embroidery, right? You had a fabric and you embroidered it and then you glued it somehow?
Glued it down.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Can't quite tell from here.
Yeah. So this piece was this free figure. And now I can pass this around. And then from doing this piece, I hadn't intentionally thought of the surrounding space, but then in this sense I thought, well, it would be sky. But then I realized that, oh, I could possibly put something on those spaces too and create a complete environment for the piece. So that's what I've done using this this particular format. Yeah, I wanted him to be up in the air, but I hadn't quite figured out how to resolve that, so he's lying on the ground.
But
He's
now
still in the
fine,
sky,
isn't
yeah.
he?
Yeah. And I hadn't figured out how to keep the sides from caving in, little things like that. But lately I've decided I wanted to simplify the form and not have so many overlapping areas. So this is a pretty beat up prototype, but it's a way I figured out how to make a box. I wanted the lid to be attached to the box. So I realized that, I could fold the lid back like that, but then that gave me a thickness when the side came down. So then I realized if I put built up panels on the sides and the bottom, then when it comes down, it'll lie flat.
Okay. Oh, great.
And so, so that's the pieces that I'm showing today are all variations on that form. So now I want to get to content, which is my favorite thing.
Can I just ask one question
Sure.
first, Peggy? How would you say you spend, as much or more time doing these sort of prototypes, just figuring out how the pieces fit as you do making the actual piece?
Well, it's actually making the actual piece that
Yes, sure.
takes more time. I mean, when you're exploring a new idea, that does take time. But once I've got the idea, then then I can do variations on
Is
it.
the top here?
The top's on the left side. Yeah.
There's where the top, oh, there it is.
Yeah. So that one is kind of tricky to fit everything together.
Well, it's an exercise in hinges.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So one of the things that I sometimes get asked is, where do you get your ideas? And that's a hard one to answer, but for me, I don't have to go looking for ideas because they're always roiling around in my head. And the crucial thing to me is finding an image that fits the idea. And sometimes the idea will come with an image. Sometimes I have to search for an image, or just let the idea go until something comes together. So what happens when I do get that connection between the image and an idea, then I go into my sketchbook. And maybe this is kind of an unusual sketchbook, but when I get an idea and a visual with it, I make notes about the image, but I do a lot of writing, and primarily what I'm doing is clarifying for me exactly what I want the image to say. And so a lot of this is where I just throw a question at myself and say, well, what material do I need to do this piece, or what colors does it need? So I try a lot of different stuff, so a lot of this I actually never do, but this gives me a way of solidifying the idea so that I know where to proceed from there. So, so this piece is a piece where I had an idea. Well, let me go back. For years, I've been particularly concerned about the environment and what we're doing to the planet. In fact, I brought a poster that I did. This is probably my first environmental piece, and this was for the first environmental teach-in at the University of Michigan in 1970. And so I did this globe trying to look at a very disturbed and Earth that's in a lot of trouble with water pollution and deforestation, et cetera.
Is this a photograph or a photo montage?
It's a photograph.
Of the object that you made?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I actually made this object. This actually is my then 5-year-old son.
I
So,
thought it was related.
so yeah, so then he posed holding. So this was actually a globe, a cardboard globe that I put everything on.
Were you living in Michigan at the time?
Yeah, yeah, in Ann Arbor, yeah. So, through all these decades, I've always had been concerned about the environmental situation, and let's see, it always seemed those ideas always seem to seep into a lot of the work that I do, whether I wanted to or not. But lately, it's become more dominant. So all of the pieces I'm going to show you have some environmental connection to them. Now this piece, this was an idea that I just had the idea. And I'd been thinking a lot about, in the past, I thought, oh, it's going to be centuries before the Earth really starts feeling the effects of what we're doing to it. But in the past decade or so, it's become obvious that a lot of people in a lot of parts of the globe are hurting from what we've done to the atmosphere, heating it up. In fact, just today there was a huge storm that's hit Bangladesh. But so I wanted to do something about the people that are actually suffering and hurting because of the climate change and the effects of what's happening. But I didn't want to have somebody in a drought and just say, this is somebody in a drought. I wanted to tie it to our use of fossil fuels and the whole fossil fuel industry. So I tried different ideas of how to visualize that, including like making a cage of logos of Exxon and everything, and that just seemed a little too obvious. So I thought about it a long time, but nothing happened until I came across this photograph. And I don't know if you can. It's the Alberta tar sands. You know that they just go over the land and just totally strip it of life, all the trees and everything. That was once forest. And so there's the totally devastated land, the polluted water, and I was particularly interested in those black kind of islands, because that's the I think they call it slag, the stuff that's left over from processing bitumen into oil. And I thought, oh, that's the place where people are stuck. You know, they're caught in they're caught in floods or droughts or fires, but what's behind it all is the fact that the atmosphere has been warmed and that we are continue to be primarily dependent on fossil fuels. So I wanted to do a piece about people caught in the fossil fuel stuff. So now that I had an image connected with the idea, I was ready to start working on the piece. And one of the first things that I did, well, the very first thing I did was to make, I wanted to get the scale of the figure so I could put a lot of them in this piece. Then I started, what I did was cut out island forms to try to arrange, and then I drew what'll be the box itself. So I knew, oh, here, let me get that out of the way. Oh, that's okay. So I knew where everything had to be in the piece. So I did these islands, kind of moved them around, and then defined them clearly. So I knew exactly what their shape was going to be. But now I had to do the water and the landmass around it. So after a number of layers of tracing paper, I came up with the final form for the piece, where I outlined the land masses. I definitely wanted the sense of the water seeping into the land, and then the land kind of started, the destroyed land starting to encroach, with the people then stranded on these islands. So, so now I have the plan, and what happened is that, since usually I do the interior first and then do the outside. But for this, since I wanted to show you the whole process, I did the outside and completed it. And now I have to start making a lot of choices. And to me, one of the most important choices is the color relationships of all the pieces in the piece. So I usually make a swaths of color and texture, the colors, fabrics, textures that I'm going to be using in the piece. And this way I can see how they relate to one another and whether they'll work, so I can play around with it until I'm pretty clear of what kind of colors I want for everything.
Does your work tend to be monochromatic?
Not always, yeah. Yeah. In fact, a piece I'm going to show you
Texture is more important almost than color.
Well, yeah, it's certainly, yeah. Uh-huh.
This is,
Yeah, I wanted to keep it very subdued and
in this case, texture.
in this
yeah.
case, yeah, yeah.
What is that texture? Did you use some kind of gel?
I'll show you I'll show you how the texture works on it. So then I have to make decisions about the various fabrics, which I had already picked out before I did the color samples. But I try on a piece on the outsides to give a sense of what's going on the inside. And so in this case, I picked a fabric that's gray, which is, not have much life to it. It's very simple and unpretentious and not elaborate in any sense. So I wanted to give a sense of this is very basic. There's nothing decorative about this. So the wrapping does protect the outside of the fabric of the inner box, but it also is the background for the whole piece. And in this case, I chose a slightly warm gray so that it would set off this fabric and make it feel a little bit cooler.
That is fabric? Yes,
This
it
is fabric, yeah, and
It's like ultra suede.
it's what?
Is it ultra suede?
No, it's just a very smooth fabric.
Oh.
And I chose it because, first of all, it kind of has an oily quality to it. And then,
Suggests iridescence.
yeah,
but it
yeah,
isn't iridescent.
yeah, that sheen I like because it gives it kind of a metallic kind of feel. And then again, I embroidered the tie and the pin. Made the pin and painted it. And always on the pieces, I try with title, which is really important to me, to pick a title that suggests the inside, what's going on the inside, not only by what it says, but how it's done on this. For instance, for this, I wanted kind of a bunching feeling, that it's sinking, going to the bottom.
And
That-
embroidery, right? Not the machine.
That's embroidery, yeah, hand embroidery, yeah, yeah. So, seeing the titles on these pieces, I hope suggest something about the piece itself, not only by what it says, but the style that I use for the typeface. And I really like the word stuck. It's a nice solid word. So let's see, I'm going to open it now. So the inside now is empty. And this now is a variation on the form of the prototype. But in this case, I've put the lid in half and fold under this way. And then these panels here and on the bottom show or make it all level.
What do you use for the hinges?
Well, initially I put the boards together with rice paper, and then, but then fabric then folds over it and reinforces it, yeah. In fact, speaking of hinges, one thing I usually do is figure out that the hinge is going to work, because I'm going to, as you know,
Hinge prototype.
right, hinge prototype, because I know that this is going to be built up. And it has to be when the sides go up, they're not going to bump into one another. So I actually use the fabric, use the layers of board that it's going to be built up on, and then make sure that I can make a nice right angle without it running into it. So now I need to build the interior of the box. And now I can go back to my original plan, because this is what I follow all the time. So I traced all the pieces of the land masses and the islands and transferred those onto wood. And what I came up with, this is one piece, I would then take the wood, and I have a small Dremel, the littlest saw, jigsaw, yeah. And so I can cut all the pieces out. So I have all those forms, and then I have to decide what the surface of the piece is going to look like.
The Dremel jigsaw is the saw that goes like that.
Yeah,
And it comes in Dremel format?
yeah. It's just a little saw. Yeah,
Sounds like a Mustang.
Well, I do have a jigsaw, but not a
Dremel.
one. I have a large one. And
Uh-huh.
I'm thinking, oh my God.
yeah. The blade is like a quarter of an inch wide at the most.
Wow.
More like a jeweler's saw.
Sort of, yeah,
it would be.
yeah,
Okay. Although, yeah, okay, thanks.
yeah. So again, going back to the concept, I wanted to do a landmass that's completely devastated. And so I ended up using sand, mixing it with matte medium, which makes a great binder.
So I noticed that
Yeah.
there's some sand on here.
Yeah.
Was this,
Yes, because I knew that there was going to be a layer of sand
I see.
in
Right,
that
right.
empire, yeah. And also, it's easy to work. You can pile it on, you can gouge it, and so I just thought it would be great for getting that sense of devastation. And then I stained it with acrylic paint washes. So now I have this piece, but and I have all the other pieces, but I can't glue these down until I resolve the water. And this is the centerpiece, and this already has the land pieces glued onto it. But before I did that, I had to do the water. And so I experimented. I wanted the water to feel really gunky and dead, so I chose this kind of greenish gray to make it look pretty sickly. And then I put a gloss medium on it to get a shininess. And when I put it on, I stippled it on to make air bubbles. And I left the air bubbles hoping to give a sense of toxins coming up to the surface of the water to make it a little bit more awful. So this goes into the middle. So now I can go with the side pieces. And these, now this is glued on, and these I trace the forms onto the board and then did the water, and then I could begin gluing the pieces on. So this piece goes here.
What do you use for glue?
Usually when I'm gluing wood, I use white glue, yeah. But for fabric, I use a fabric glue that works.
Tacky glue?
I use Sobo glue.
Sobo.
Yeah. So now I can put down all four sides. I have them all marked on back so I can put them in the right places. So you can see, now I have the environment, and hopefully a very devastated environment. So now it needs the islands and the people. So I made the islands, again, cutting out the wood form and then building them with balsa wood. Then actually I drilled all the holes for all the people on the islands, so then afterwards I could put sand mixed with matte medium on that and paint them black. So the people, all the time that I'm doing this, I'm also working on the people. And a problem with having people in pieces is that no matter what you dress them in, you'll either indicate ethnicity or class or gender or something like that. So I wanted something to show that these are all people all over the globe suffering in various ways. So I kept thinking about, okay, these people are hurt, these people are injured. What would they have in common? And I realized that what they would have in common is they would be wrapped in bandages.
Oh, interesting.
So to show that harm, I wrapped all the figures in bandages, and then they fit in their respective holes on the little islands. Now this one I'm not filling in all the figures because it would just take too long, but I do have all the other islands done, so I can put them down for you. Let's see. This goes here.
Wow.
Impressive.
That's
Very impressive.
distressing.
My God.
And I tried to give each figure a kind of personal gesture. Some are giving up, some are reaching for help, some are consoling one, a few are consoling one another.
What's the material? Oh, it is bandage, isn't it?
Well, actually,
Is it-
gauze, I was going to
Yes.
do gauze, but gauze has too open a weave.
Right,
So I used crinoline, which is stiffer,
yeah.
but had a smaller weave because I didn't. since they're so, matching the scale is always a challenge. Let's see.
And you managed to make them so that when the box closes, the figures don't interfere.
Right, yeah. Actually, in the original plan, I had to kind of figure what would happen
So
when.
you have, okay.
Yeah, now like this, when I close it,
Yeah.
it'll miss.
Okay,
Yeah,
they will miss it.
Yeah.
Right.
I have one that's kind of close, but I think I can fudge it.
Had you made figures before in other pieces that kind of informed these little miniatures? Or is this a first?
Well, I've used other figures. I think this is probably the smallest I've tried to do. I usually don't have this many figures. So there you have it. Once this is filled in. So I just have to glue everything down, put in the figures in, and then make the wood box for the outside for it to live in. So, okay, this piece, another gray outside. And on this, the title.
Broken Garden?
Looking
Looking
good.
good.
Looking good. Looking good in a bunch of rocks. And this is another one of these boxes that open this way. Now, maybe I can turn this.
Wow.
On the floor of it? What are the white? Are they shells?
These, they're bones.
Oh.
Yeah.
And the larger bush?
These? I don't know where they came from, but I thought they were kind of the epitome of dead and dying plants.
Short-sighted, wow. That's
They're
great.
from nature,
That's
though.
great.
Yeah, they are natural forms. Yeah, sometimes they do use natural.
And the fabric makes such an incredible foundation for that.
Oh, yeah, and I actually tried to pick out stones that were about the same
And
size.
you made the little human figures.
Yeah.
Yeah. Out of what material?
Well, balsa wood and a lot of filler, and a lot of filing and
When you
shaping.
do the balsa wood, you sculpt it then?
Yeah.
So you take a thick piece of balsa wood and actually do a sculpture out of it.
Well, actually, I do it in pieces. So, like, I'll do the torso and then add the legs and add the arms, etc.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you sew the clothes.
And then I sew the clothes, yeah. And I don't know if you can. Yeah, so what would you make of
That's
that?
all that matters, right? What you can see in the mirror.
That's the point, yeah.
And they're certainly not seeing what's going on
Yeah,
around
they're
them.
blind.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about appearance.
Wow.
Okay. And then I wanted to, well, how does it feel to you that the backs are exposed? Do you have?
That makes the point. Yeah, that makes the point.
Yeah,
Vulnerable.
exactly.
You can't see how vulnerable they are.
Right, yeah, that's what I was. I,
It reminds me of the Emperor's New Clothes.
Yeah.
oh, right. Yeah, okay. Now this is a slightly different concept, but, and then the wrapping, green usually suggests nature to me, so
Yes.
it's kind of warm, enclosing nature. Now this piece, here's the title. It's pretty subtle.
Ars
It's
brevis.
Ars brevis, and it's a variation on the old Latin thing, Ars longus vita brevis. Art is long, life is short. And I kept thinking about, well, you know, that's really doesn't seem right because life seems a lot longer than art. So I explored that and then did this piece about that idea.
Oh,
Oh my gosh.
Oops.
Was
No,
this
this-
in the show? I don't remember.
This, no, these are all brand new.
Yeah.
well, tell us about the images that you chose for each of the little frames.
Well, these are all classical Western art.
Okay.
Yeah,
I see
There's-
the Last Supper.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Picasso, Bruegel,
How did
Van
you
Gogh.
make these? You made them on the computer?
Yeah, I Xeroxed
You
them.
took-
Yeah,
Xeroxed them and then reduced.
reduced them. Yeah.
Photoshop.
I wanted to do forms that were totally unique. And so actually at a book sale I found this great book called Manipulating Fabric. And it had all these ways of working with fabric to put it into all different kinds of forms. And I thought, oh, I need to explore that. So I used that a lot to get like the puffball kind of thing. And these are were flounces.
And the spines. Huh?
These,
Yes.
the spines are, I actually denuded a barberry bush. I had a wonderful painting teacher who emphasized that the darks and light in a painting express the drama of the painting, but the color expresses the mood of the painting. And so I've always used that as I need that color to evoke the whole atmosphere of the piece. Oh, you're welcome. It's a real pleasure. Thank you for your responses. That's great. Yeah.